Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. In this episode is my Louisiana Election Forum, where I'm bringing on a couple times a week, many candidates at a time. We're doing 15-minute intervals to be able to make it quick, easy to get the chance to know them. My first interview is Emily Chenevert. Emily, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Look, thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak with you today. I really appreciate it as well.
Now, you're running for state rep somewhere in Baton Rouge. I'm going to say it that way because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that say they're running for state rep. Where's your little district where's
Yeah.
your district in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, so I'm running in District 66, which is basically this kind of the southern part of Baton Rouge. It really kind of borders right there with like up to Ascension Parish, that line right there. So anything like around Highland Road, it kind of goes all the way down Highland Road, kind of down Burbank area where University Club and some of those areas are, River Road, and then basically close to that area. And then really, it kind of really heads up half of Shenandoah. People that are in Baton Rouge, they know when you say Shenandoah, it's a very large neighborhood, half of that area into Harold's Ferry and Hoosiatu area. I mean, it's a big area.
Well, then I have to now you border it was that area border up with like Hollis Days running in that area too,
Yeah,
right?
he's actually one of the ones running in my district as well. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, I didn't realize that, but hey, that's that's two good people for that area,
We
But either
got
way,
we had good candidates, but I'm excited about it. It's been a lot of work. We're meeting a lot of people in the district face to face, and so I've enjoyed it. Enjoyed it.
well, the areas that have some good representation there with either one of you, I'll say. I didn't know y'all were running for the same seat, but either way, let's talk about you in this one. In right now, what's your background, Emily? What's your strong points?
Yeah, well, look, great question. For those that are listening, they don't know much about me. I always like I'm a Louisiana native, been here. I mean, grandparent, mother, father. I was raised in Leesville, Louisiana, Vernon Parish. There's a central part of the state, and then grew up there, but have been in Baton Rouge since college. Came to LSU, graduated Manship School of Communications, and then started a communications career. And my whole background really has been communications, film, and media. Also in ministry. I served and worked at a large church after I worked at WBRZ for a little bit after college and worked in the media production team at Healing Place Church that's in my district. But again, I've lived in this district pretty much almost my whole life being in Baton Rouge. And so served there as a communications person. In ministry, sometimes you wear a lot of different hats. And so, I was a communications director, but also helped with the media team on weekends and storytelling and all of that. We did a lot of that during Hurricane Katrina. We did a lot of relief work during that time. And so doing communications for that. And then worked as a communications director for an anti-human trafficking organization. That's something that's very important to me, and just bringing awareness to that issue. We are in the I-10, I-12 corridor in Louisiana. And so because of the interstate, it is a heavy area of trafficking, of human trafficking. So did that for a season. But then the film industry is really where I've spent a lot of my time, William, as far as a production manager, line producer, and a coordinator on very large studio movies that were all shot in Louisiana. And then on the smaller budgets, I like to say in that 1 million to 5 million, it's still a lot of money, right? But
Right.
for a movie, it's a small movie. So I did that as a line producer, production manager. And for people, it was behind the scenes. And so a lot of the budgeting and the hiring and just managing personalities and managing the day-to-day operations and working with a great team. And so I'm big on that. I think that's one thing for me is that, in that industry, I really had to work from people from kind of all over the country. A lot of people from both coasts, where New York,
Right.
California, and then Louisiana, and to get the job done. And so I like working with people. I love that process. And so did that for a season. And then now with kids, it was 12 to 14-hour days are long. And long days. So I was 8 months pregnant, running around on set, and I was
Wow.
my second son, lots of energy. And the director was like, I can't imagine you not pregnant working on it. Like you have so much pregnant. But yeah, I just decided to kind of work for myself a little bit and serve as so I work with a church planning organization and just then work with other nonprofits as needed. And then like a small business wanted to help with events or production or a training. My background is at live production and also behind the scenes in film production. So anything.
Emily, I have really not only enjoyed listening to your path and your story, but there's a lot to say about that. Your communication, it's that thread of communication skills has run through everything that you've done. And
Mhm.
your ability to communicate and the energy that you have has really helped you out there. I say helped you. It's been able to help everybody that you've been involved with be able to advance what they're doing. And
Yeah.
then when you've ended up in a more of a faith-based scenario, there's a lot to say about this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it is. All of our path, I always think about it for me. Faith is a big part of my life. And my faith has actually helped me work with people that don't think like me and that we're not on the same page. It gives me a lot of grace and kind of mercy in these conversations. But also helps me to keep my ground and stand up and stand for truth. And I'd say righteousness, but also, and for freedoms and liberties, right? I think it's all
Absolutely.
big part of it's just that foundation has helped me to become that person really. And then stepping into politics, and like I didn't set honestly, William, I didn't decide to do this, like I wasn't like set out a career where I knew I would do this, 10, 15 years ago. But the last few years, because of my faith, because of seeing some freedoms and seeing some things going on in the country and the world that we're in today, I just think we need more people that have great conviction and that have some courage and a lot of common sense, right? That are willing to kind of stand when it's difficult, disagree without dishonor, but still stand firm. And I think that's what we need more in everyday politics. And I would say at every single level, local, state, and federal,
I love this. And you said something that I bring up. Look, I certainly agree with the conservative minded agenda. And I can certainly agree with my friends, my other Republican friends, on how much we need a Republican conservative minded legislature and governor this next year. But you said something that I'm always saying is when you said that you can reach people on faith with people who don't think like you, people who are on the other side of the fence. We're still going to have Democrats in the legislature. We're still going to have people. Look, half the Republicans don't agree with each other,
right.
even though they keep saying we need a Republican legislature. We got we call them rhinos, call them whatever. We got so many people who don't think like us in the legislature. We need bridge builders, and that doesn't mean that you have to leave your convictions or your beliefs on the other side of the bridge to cross it to meet somebody or meet somebody in the middle. We have to have good communication skills, and I'm glad that you bring that to the table. But I want to ask you a couple of questions. What
Yep.
do you think are some of Louisiana's biggest problems that we're faced with that you think you can have something to do with?
Well, a lot of candidates, when we're out, a lot of us are saying a lot of the same things, right? We see the numbers, we see people leaving the state, we see young people that are deciding not to start businesses here for lots of reasons, whether it's taxation, education's a problem, and crime. Look, I'm actually knocking on doors and like talking to constituents myself, and so I have my ideas of like, hey, this is what I care about. Like, I care about the things that families are concerned about. Like, we sit down, I call it kitchen table economics, where
Right.
you're adding up the dollars and you're looking at the taxation, you're looking at your insurance go up, you're looking at your cost of gas and food. Like, that stuff that is like that hits home with people. And I think when I'm knocking on doors, I think they're like, man, in Louisiana, my concern is it is education. It is, if I'm in an area where they feel like the schools aren't good for their children, what are my options here? And so they're like, am I paying property taxes and then also paying a double tax because I'm paying
Right.
private? So I think ESAs, finding a way to do education savings accounts or something that we're seeing in other states where it's giving parents an option to say, hey, this may not be the best idea, right? I may not be in a community school. Maybe a charter school is great. My children go to a public charter school in Baton Rouge. It's a really striving charter school, but private school parents that want to do that, I think we got to have money that follows the child, not the system. And I think that's
Okay.
parents. And I think it's just going to create that competition and it's going to make every school kind of rise to the top, right? Like you've got to do well in order to get kids there. So I'm big on education. And I think that, that's a key thing. I think that component helps with business. I think that if people are going to start businesses and they're young and they're coming out of college and like, where do I want to do this? They love Louisiana. They love their family. They don't want to leave, but they're going to go to another state if they feel like they have if there's, no income tax to start,
Right.
or just some of those business
Mm.
components that I'm concerned about. And then crime, like they say when they knock on the door. Now, crime is something that's so local, right? When it comes to your local mayors and your local police force. But I do think we need to keep incentivizing and think through a way. Again, I'm not privy to the budget. I don't see where all the dollars are going in those debates yet.
Right.
I'm not there
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. I
But
like that.
I do think that that's something we've got to make sure that the messaging of our support for police in Louisiana has got to be strong. I am big on messaging. I am big on having a positive mentality. A lot of these people that are going to be going into like the trainings and deciding if they want to be officers, they've been listening to this defund the police for years. They've been listening to this narrative across the nation. Is it going to make people want to go into this? Is it going to make them be like, if I don't have a good pay and I can go make more in Texas or make more in Florida? So I think that's a big thing for me, because I think if education and crime, I think people like Louisiana in general, maybe
Right.
hope-filled, right? But I feel like the business component, the family component, I think that we've got great industry here. If we can just make sure that people feel safe and people
Mhm.
good place for their kids to go to school, if we prioritize those things, I think the other stuff is like kind of the idea of like build those things well and they will come. Like that's kind of like
No, I love your approach on education on children and on crime and safety. I think that's a very important part of the puzzle. Unfortunately, I think Louisiana has gotten far behind in a lot of areas, and so this is a multi-fronted battle, I guess you could say,
it
which
is.
I think is very doable. I think Louisiana is poised it's in a very good place. It's poised to really be a gem, of the gem of the South, as it once was at one point. I think that we need the right combination of legislators, and that's why I'm doing these forums, because I think it's not just finding that shiny candidate in one particular district. I think it's finding all of the right ones in all the districts and putting together the right team. And
Right.
that's why I'm doing this, because Louisiana right now needs an LSU team that's going to the national championships. I I mean, we really do. I mean, we got to have the right quarterback, we have the right defensive line, the right offensive line, and I'm making that fun analogy for just a second, but the reality is we need people who are strong in education, strong on communication, strong on safety, but also the other key component is finding ways to eliminate our state income tax and finding ways to bring business and industry in. And that comes sometimes when you see the budget, I guess, like you pointed out a minute ago.
Well, I mean, you work on that stuff and you see like what are the things that look, and this is not. I always like to say, you haven't walked in people's shoes yet that have been in office, and so I'm really I shy away from strong critique in that sense. Yet I haven't been there yet. I haven't sat down and debated and had these conversations.
Right.
I have a little grace on this side, you before you step into that. However, families have to do that, William. They sit down every week or every month and they look at their budget and they say, we've got to cut this. We can't do vacation. We can't go here. Man, it would really be good, but we've got to do the needs and that's it. We've got to have that same mentality. Some
Right.
not always
Right.
popular, right? It's not, but it's not popular to sit down with your husband and wives and sit down like, what can't we do this month or what can't we do this year? And it's okay. And it's you do that to get to a better place. And I think I am big on next generation. I have spoken to young adults. I have spoken at conferences. I've spoken at like, to 20s and to teenagers as far as from a faith component in my church. And so for me, I'm doing this because I care greatly about the next generation of Louisianians. And so we've got to make decisions that are not just going to benefit those of us in office for 2 or 3, 4 years, right? Just
Right.
elected. It's going to be what's the goal for 10 to 15, 20 years down the road. And I think, I think about that as a mom. I'm making decisions now from our kids and you're constantly thinking about that in your own home, right? So it's just the same thing. Take that same mentality to the Capitol.
You know what I like, that what you just now said, you think about you're thinking about the future generations. You said it slightly differently than some people running for office do. A lot of elected officials say, I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the future, of our citizens. But when you talk about the future generations and the way that you did, it really focuses at, hey, look, it's like, I'm not planting trees now because I like the way trees look now. I'm planting trees so our future generations can enjoy those trees in our community. And you're really looking for building things not to say, hey, wave the flag, look what I did now. You're saying that you want people to be a look back generations from now to look back and say, hey, look, Emily Chenevert did this, a generation or 2 generations ago, and it made this difference. All right, I've got my next guest on, so I want to ask you your one last question. How
Yep.
will you put freedom first in Louisiana?
Hey, easy question for me. Our role as an elected official is to protect the Constitution, and I think we've got to make sure that people that are elected have a philosophy of what the Constitution is. That it is to me, it is a finger pointing back at government and reminding of what their limitations are. It is not a finger pointing to the people and telling them what they can and cannot do. And so we've got to have that philosophy that says, hey, everything that we do is make sure it does not violate our freedoms and our liberties, period. And it's pretty simple like that. It's going to be more difficult one-on-one and different legislation, but that's the goal because look, I care greatly about it. We've seen what government overreach has done through COVID, and we just have to say no more to that.
Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I look forward to running into you again out and about. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey, Scott, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I say Scott because I know you're on a personal level, but Representative McKnight on a professional level, you've been out and about as a state rep for a long time, and now you want to take those skills to the next level, and you're running for treasurer, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
You've been doing this. You've been running for some time though. But before we talk about treasurer, I'd like to talk about your accomplishments. And look, I'm getting to the point because while I could talk to you on a friendly level forever, these 15-minute interviews go quick and they're designed that way so people don't get bored and feel tedious. Let's talk about your accomplishments as state rep that you think brought you to this treasurer's race.
Yeah, so and I know you probably get there, but a little bit about my background is,
yes,
I've been in the financial services industry for 25 years. Currently, vice president and director of business development for Cadence Insurance, but the financial services industry for 25 years and been in the House for a term. And so, putting those experiences together has really brought me here. I've loved to serve. I grew up in a family that taught me to serve, and so I've done many things to give back to my community and state. Including being a reserve deputy for the sheriff's office in East Baton Rouge Parish. And so that drive to serve and my experience in financial services and my legislative experience is really what brought me here. But, my time in the legislature has been great. I really have enjoyed working with my colleagues to really make some good things happen. I've had some great bills that I've personally authored. The one that I always go directly to is the Steve Carter Literacy Program, only because Steve was my predecessor in the House, really great man who focused on education, and it was his passion. Steve passed away shortly before I was, came into the office or right after. And this was a way to recognize all his accomplishments, do some really good things with major issues that we have in our state, reading being a major problem. And we've seen a lot.
Exactly right.
Yeah, a lot of different legislation to attack that deficiency that we have. And so that's the one I'll always go to because it was so close to me and close to the people in my district to really honor Steve and set us on the right path to get kids back to reading level.
So what exactly did that reading bill do?
So it set up a tutoring program and dollars that parents could go apply for that would then allow for them to go to tutoring centers or teachers that were qualified through the program and get additional help with their reading during the summers. And so this was a really a parent-driven program. It wasn't a school-driven. You were independent of your school system, able to go get that help, and it set up that framework. We weren't able to get the funding for it initially, but when some of these federal dollars came in during COVID, Superintendent Brumley took our program and took the framework and set up the program with the money they had come in. So we were happy to have a program kind of designed and ready to go for that instance, not knowing what was coming, but we had something that was ready to go.
So I see three things here. I see that you felt that education was important enough that you fought for it and teaching kids. It didn't get the funding that it needed right away, so you didn't let go. So you stayed persistent to make sure it happened. But three, while a lot of elected officials, will use education as the shiny object and say, I'm good for education. They're waving their flag. I'm good for education. Oftentimes, they don't put action and persistence behind it. And it sounds to me like that's kind of what you did here, with it, because I think that people forget about how important education is to our communities and now our state to get to the next level.
Yeah, and not only that, the other bill that I really enjoyed doing, well, there's a few of them, but One of them I co-authored with Nikki Muscarello, and this past session, and we passed a bill that requires financial literacy to be taught in high schools, which is an extremely important issue that we're just not teaching our kids what it means to be in the real world, what it means to have a checking account and pay your bills and all of that. That's one thing that I think was extremely important, and Nikki did a great job. I was drafting my own bill. We compared them; they were very close. He was further down the line with talking with people about it, so I just co-authored his with him. But there was another one that I did that was really great. We've seen some of these universities come down on students for things that happen at the school, and those students were not allowed to have legal representation in the room with them when they were having these discussions with the university. Kids were getting expelled and suspended without having anybody there to fight for them and due process. And so I passed the student due process bill.
I remember that.
And so it gives our students the due process they deserve to see the evidence that the university has against them, and to be able to fight for their right to stay in school and defend themselves. So that was really a good one that I enjoyed doing as well.
It sounds to me like you're looking at some of the puzzle pieces, some of those base building blocks that we needed for a good foundation. So, what caused you to run for state treasurer now? What was the catalyst? Because you're one term in the state in the House, and now you're going to treasurer. What made you want to make that leap so soon? Most people wait their full 12 years and then go. What made you want to do it now?
Well, look, again, I told you my history. I've got 25 years in the financial services industry. Very rarely, I'm 42 years old. So to have 25 years of experience in the financial industry at my age is I put the time in. I've really done the work. I've learned it, and I've been able to help our clients. I mean, look, our clients we have billions and billions of dollars of our clients' assets that we protect and manage for them. And so to take that experience, then as you mentioned, my 4 years in the legislature, to know how the things inside that building work, to know how the state budget is built. I've been there.
Right.
I've helped them get through the process at times. I was able to, include projects and things that I thought were important to my district and the state. And so you combine the relationships I have and the experience I have inside the Capitol with that 25 years, and it really uniquely positions me for state treasurer. Now, the reason I'm not sitting around waiting for 12 years is, look, this is not a hobby. This is not something that I believe that we should wait. Our people serving us should be waiting till they're turned out. Okay, where's my next place? How do I stay in government?
How do I stay important? Yeah.
And so for me, this is about serving the people of Louisiana with my experience and where I can move and do the most good for the state and our citizens. And so, not to wait. I could have run for re-election and probably would have won re-election fairly easily if I'd had any opponents. I'd do a good job representing my district. That's the easy path, but that doesn't mean the easy path is the right path.
Okay.
So for me, I saw an opportunity when I heard Treasurer Schroeder was going to take a run at governor. And I saw the great things he has done as treasurer. And, we need to pick up the ball where he's leaving it on the field and get it all the way down the field to the end zone. Of course, in this job, the field keeps getting longer. I don't know. There's never an end. But we got to continue to progress. And Treasurer Schroeder's done a phenomenal job. And the next treasurer is walking into an extremely well-functioning office.
So let's talk about that for a second. If it's so well functioning, what do you think that you can do better or differently, or parlay his good work into doing something, making an even better office? Do you have a plan for that? Do you think that there's something to do that? And I got another question for you after that on how you might connect that office back to the state reps to be able to help protect Louisianians. But I'll let you answer the first question first.
Yeah, so, for people that don't really know a lot about what the treasurer does, because a lot of people don't, to be honest with you.
Right.
Like you mentioned, I've spent 15 months campaigning that I've been doing this. I've been traveling the state, and a lot of people just don't know much about the office. So I would tell you that, the three to four main functions of the treasurer's office is, one, cash management of the state, managing the bank account and the cash flow, investing the taxpayers' dollars that we have on hand, the unclaimed property fund, which is probably the most public-facing part of the treasurer's office, and then being chairman of the bond commission, which is where Another kind of municipalities really interact with the treasurer's office most often.
Mhm.
There's a lot of other things. You sit on 30-something boards and Louisiana Asset Management Pool and all these different things. So we could go through the typical things of investing our dollars smart and get the best, highest return on our investments, protecting ourselves from hackers as technology gets better. It also makes us susceptible to getting hacked, as we saw with the DMV recently. So doing
Right.
all things, the normal things, but the new thing that I believe that we can do, I've already started meeting with our next Commissioner of Insurance, Tim Temple, and we're going through ideas and different scenarios on how the Treasurer's Office can interact with the Commissioner of Insurance and use state assets as an investment, a protected investment, to go increase the reinsurance capacity in Louisiana. So insurance markets are very complex and difficult, and
Right.
don't have enough time to go through it. But
Right.
reinsurance capacity is the major problem we have right now, and reinsurance is built off global effects. War in Ukraine, fractured energy markets, high inflation rates, and high interest rates, and so the lack of capacity in that market is really keeping a lot of insurance companies from coming to Louisiana and being able to pick up enough policies and have enough capacity. And it's getting more and more expensive as capacity comes down, the price goes up
Right.
in order to protect it. So I think there's an opportunity through state assets that we can make investments, get return on our dollars, protect our base investment, and potentially increase that reinsurance capacity just for our state. You can explore doing that and sharing with our other Gulf states as well to kind of spread that out and help them in their markets as well. So I think there's a really big opportunity here, but it's going to take a new generation of leaders to really look and be able to collaborate and come up with new ideas, because the old ones are not going to cut it. We have to come up with new ways of doing things.
There's two things that you said which spark excitement in me a little bit. Is one, you connected the state treasurer's job to worldwide events. Excuse me. And I think that is very, very important, that you're not just looking at what's happening in Louisiana, and you're not just waving the flag on what a lot of other elected officials say when they go, they say Texas, Florida, Arkansas, all these country states around us. You're actually connecting and say, hey, look, I'm aware of the worldwide events that are affecting the reinsurance program, that could affect us here locally in Louisiana. But what I also like that you said is that you're already talking to Tim Temple, who's our next insurance commissioner, because I've talked to him a little bit and I've said, look, what are some of the out of the box thinking ideas that you're going to do to help lower insurance rates? And if you're already talking to him about that, and you're already coming up with some of those out of the box thinking ideas, I think that we need, because we've got these funds. I said, why can't Louisiana? And again, we're not going to be able to discuss details, but why can't Louisiana have its own insurance type of program that where some of the money that we have, in Louisiana can back some of the insurance companies in a way to help lower rates? And of course, that's a very simplistic way of putting it. And Tim Temple is like, well, I'm already on something like that. And knowing that you're talking to him about that, I think that's a really unique way to help Louisianians, especially this time of an insurance crisis.
Yeah, look, I think that what I've done in the legislature is I've worked really well with my colleagues. We can't look in the legislature. One vote doesn't get you anywhere. 52 votes
Right.
doesn't get you anywhere. You got to be able to work with people to come up with solutions and buy in on collaborating to solve problems. As state treasurer, I don't get to write legislation. I have to go to the legislature and rely on those relationships that I have with the legislators to get any legislation I believe we need to further the state. I then believe that it's incumbent on us as statewide officials, to work together to make sure that we connect with the Attorney General's office, the Commissioner of Insurance office, the governor, everybody, the Secretary of State at all levels, and sit down at a table and say, guys, how do we come together and leverage what each of our offices has under its blanket, under its umbrella, and come together and figure out how to solve some of these problems? Because doing it individually and trying to, one person trying to take credit for the solution and have it completely under them just doesn't work.
Right.
We have to come together. And look, I'm the kind of guy that I don't care if I have the microphone in my hand. It doesn't have to have my name on it. As long as it solves the problem for the citizens of Louisiana, then I'm all on board.
So let's talk about that real quick. I know one of the things that you and I talked about off camera at another function is some of the things that John Schroeder has done, like protecting us from what ESG, I think, and some of these other things that because when you talk about not only talking about the old ways that we can't do anymore and finding the new ways, oftentimes that gets confused with some of the things that I think are going to infringe on our liberty and freedom here in not only Louisiana but in America. You're fighting some of that. Can you talk with us about that a little bit?
Well, look, I think that it's a very complex question,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to summarize it in our last couple of minutes here.
Yeah, look, I will start with Treasurer Schroeder's done a phenomenal job, as I said earlier. I think that, again, a lot of people are not familiar with the Treasurer's office, but where it has come into the spotlight recently has really been around that ESG investing and the move that he made to move roughly $1 billion away from BlackRock in that investment strategy. And that's something that we need to continue to watch. Look, Louisiana has a huge oil and gas and petrochemical presence. It provides thousands and thousands of great paying jobs to Louisiana citizens. And any type of investment strategy that is detrimental to that business is not good for the economy of Louisiana. And not
That's
good
it. That's a good way to put it.
And so we can make these moves. ESG, any politically driven investment strategy that takes politics in it, regardless of what extreme it is, does not return dollars as well as pure financial decisions. And in order to do things, we got to get the highest investment, but we cannot hurt the economy of Louisiana in the process.
Right.
It is an important part of this job and this position to not only get that return, but to make sure the citizens and our way of life, our values, and our economy are not damaged by it.
I like this. That's a unique way of putting it because I haven't heard it put that way. When Schroeder announced that, there were some people that were commenting against it. I'll say that they didn't agree with that action. But what you're explaining right now, something I didn't hear him explain, which is we're oil and gas state. If you're why invest in something that's against oil and gas? That it basically is a double negative, if you will, right?
Correct. And the thing is this conversation has been really surrounded about the environmental piece, the E and the ESG, mostly for us. And I think that people believe that just because you have investments in the oil and gas industry means that you're not exploring alternative methods. That's not the case. Oil and gas companies and petrochemical companies spend more money exploring all the different clean energy ways than anybody else. It's just that they recognize that this is not a light switch that you turn on and off and take one out and put a new one in. You have to supplement it over time and let that network grow. It doesn't mean you don't invest in it and have that alternative. It means you got to recognize the capacity at which you can really do it and the pace at which it moves. So yeah, it is about making sure everything we do is smart investments, but also is smart for the economy and the citizens of Louisiana.
So 2 more quick questions for you while we're waiting for the next guest. One, when you get into the office, what is the first thing you're going to do? You've already talked with Tim Temple, you've talked with Schroeder, you sound like you have the experience. What's the first things that you do when you get in the office?
Well, look, I think the reality of it is the first day after the election really starts the first day. Yes, you don't get sworn in until January 8th, but the first day is the next day after election because there is a transition period between the person leaving the office and the person coming in, and evaluating what staff is going to stick around. Look, you may have plenty of people that have been in that office forever that said, you know what, I'm not sticking around for another treasurer, regardless of who it is and how great they are. But you gotta do an evaluation of the staff and start filling holes where people leave, or and so that's got to be number one,
right?
Because until you're in the office, you don't fully understand what you're dealing with. So you can do your best, and we're trying. We've met with different people to fully understand it, but you got to get in there, sit down, meet with people, fully understand all the parts that you can, and make evaluations on where where's the fire. Let's go put the first fire out. The good thing is that the next treasurer is walking into a great office. So I think a lot of that is going to go very, very smoothly. And the next thing you do is you got to start collaborating with our legislature and with our new statewide elected officials and start saying, guys, what are our priorities? Insurance is going to be number one on my list because it's affecting more people and more businesses than just about anything else. Insurance, crime, and education, to me, are the three things that affect more citizens than anything else.
I love how you, as I said, I love how you connected the worldwide politics, and now you're connecting our local issues in the state. You're not just throwing your hands in the air and saying, well, I'm the treasurer, I don't handle that. You're saying, I'm the treasurer, how can I help? And
Correct.
I like that you said that. My last question for you is, how will you put freedom and liberty first in your position as treasurer?
Well, look, I think your last guest, Emily Chenevert, did a great job of answering that question, which is we've got to defend the Constitution and make sure that there's any actions we're taking are not going against the Constitution, not just the United States Constitution of the United States, but the Constitution of Louisiana, and making sure that we are protecting that. That's going to be done, quite frequently through just the pure functions of our offices. That's what we do every day to make sure that we are functioning within those guidelines and that we're not doing anything contrary to any of those documents. And I think, look, I've said it, I say it all the time. If you do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, you'll never go wrong. And so that's what we're looking to do the right thing for the right reason at the right time when decisions come to us.
Representative McKnight, that's an awesome way to end this little interview. I appreciate your time, and thank you very much. Look, I tell you what, I want more people to look into you. How can they find out? What's your site?
So McKnight for LA, McKnight FORLA.com is our website. We're on all social media platforms. So please go look us up. And hey, look, if you got kids or grandkids that are excited about Taylor Swift, we are raffling off 2 Taylor Swift floor tickets for people that are getting engaged in the campaign. Look, we got to come up with new ways to engage voters and get them interested in the campaign. And this was one way that we thought we could get people to come look that may not normally look at the treasurer's office. So go look there. You can buy raffle tickets on the website. So it's exciting.
Representative McKnight, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. Hey, Randy Bush, how are you today?
What's up, William? How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. Thank you for coming on today.
It looks like you go from one to the other, right?
I do. In these forums, I'll usually do 8 to 10 people in about 2 hours, and we do them quick. We knock them out. That way the audience doesn't have to listen to an hour of somebody talking. And I have those too occasionally.
Gotcha.
But these are important because we have a short amount of time before the election to introduce everybody to who's running for office, but also we have a short amount of time to turn Louisiana around. We want everybody to meet the people running for office. You're running for state rep, and in what district is that?
Actually, it's state senate, and it's in a brand new district for our area in the St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, Livingston area.
Okay.
State Senate District 37 was in Shreveport. They lost population. St. Tammany, Ascension, Livingston, Tangipahoa, we gained population. So when the census came out, it was good. We did some redistricting, and they took 37 and moved it down south. So it's 15,000 people in St. Tammany, 95,000 in Tangipahoa, and 3,000 people in Livingston.
Well, this is a little education for me. And a reminder will say I had heard this a long time ago and completely forgotten about it, and you just reminded me. So you're going automatically for the Senate.
Yes, the last 4 years. Let me finish a little bit about that. I was a school board member the last 4 years, and so in 2019, my first year, I had some questions about stuff. So I contacted senators. We had 4 in Tangipahoa Parish state senators, but none of them lived in Tangipahoa Parish. And as I researched back, I want to say maybe 100 years, you could go on their site. I couldn't find a senator that's actually represented us in Baton Rouge that lived in Tangipahoa Parish. So this would be the first one. And so I was hoping the census would show us having good numbers, and they would maybe take Senator Bodie White, who had term limit out, and rearrange his district some and make it more Tangipahoa Parish. But they started a brand new one. So, yes, I was a school board member the last 4 years and didn't seek re-election this past fall because I knew I was doing this year.
This is
we could have the first senator that actually has represented Tangipahoa Parish, that lives in Tangipahoa Parish, and my friend, that's going to be me.
I love it. Look, I say I love it because I saw you last night at the Freedom Caucus dinner, and we're going to talk about that at the end of the interview. So you've given it a little bit about your background. You were a school board member. Professionally, what have you done professionally that gives you some of this experience?
Education is count my school board member, either private, part-time, public schools, been over 31 years. So that's mainly my background. I was a real estate agent the last 7 years, and also a small business owner. So, but education is the main focus.
So you've been in education for a long time already.
Yes, over 3 decades total.
So now what did you do before school? I mean, you were a principal, were you a teacher?
Well, yeah, I didn't even start. Here's a success story. I didn't even take the ACT test until I was 5 years out of high school.
Okay.
So I was a late bloomer. So I took it at Southeastern and entered, and so I started out being a teacher, coach / athletic director, whatever. Ended up being an assistant principal, and got to the point where I was asked, you need to make a move to be a principal, or you can retire with insurance for life. And I took it, and then ran for school board a few years later. And here I am today with a lot of educational knowledge. And of course, no matter where you are, whatever you listen to people talk about, they say the number one thing is your state needs is a good education system.
Well, and that's I think an important piece of the puzzle to bringing Louisiana back is education, but there's a lot of other pieces too there. So we've really focused on education so far in your interview, and we got about 5-6 minutes left. What else do you see as being a problem in Louisiana that you want to go after and fix besides education?
Well, we could talk about the crime issue, the drug issue, the tax issue, the insurance issue, infrastructure, flooding, hurricane protection. But, all that's important, and that's what most everybody talks about. But I think it's also a morality issue as far as, what we're being, I don't want to say forced on us to do, but, you and I are kind of experienced, not older. Who would have ever dreamed that we would be arguing whether boys can go use the girls' dressing room to dress out?
Right, exactly.
Who would have thought that? And there's people who will say that's okay. And I think in Baton Rouge we had an opportunity to just shut all this down. Even today, a teacher or in school employees can't look on a birth certificate and see what your gender is, male or female, and address you that way. So I guess if your kid comes to school and it thinks it's a cat, you would have to address it as an animal, and that could really happen now. So I think there's a lot of issues like that out there. They might be national, but they are creeping in Louisiana, and it's just more than gender. It's but it's a morality thing where I just can't. It's mind-boggling that we got away from good, godly, Christian, conservative principles.
So that's like I said, there's a lot, and there's an issue where there was somebody who identifies as a cat, in another state. But here's my problem, or one of the things I have an issue with is that, I'm one of these guys that said I think that the legislatures do too much sometimes. They go into session and they want to create a bill or a law on a lot of the national narrative issues. Okay, but I also think that. That when those national narrative issues affect our state in a way that we spend too much time focusing on how to include a male who wants to participate in female sports, and then the whole state shuts down, and that's what everybody is focusing on, that's also a problem. So it's almost like we have to need a law to stop it from happening so we can focus on the things like, bringing business and industry into Louisiana, lowering taxes and getting rid of the state income tax and improving education. So where are you on that?
Oh, it's got to go. I mean, I've been saying this for years. Now, if other states might not have went that direction, whether it be Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, whatever, but it's working in other places. And so we're still kind of stuck here. But the personal income tax has got to go. We have got to get away from that. And of course, what we've been hearing for a long time, our state budget's $50 billion. What a few years ago was half that. So it's really not collecting money from our citizens. That's how we're spending it. You just can't outspend yourself out of this problem. I mean, you just can't keep raising government. So I'm like what we heard last night and this weekend. It's not much about replacing that money that we get from a tax. It's lowering government, what we spend our budget.
Right.
It is very important to do. And if I could sit there and say we got a great business climate, we got a great school climate, we got a great law enforcement, Louisiana's doing good. We doubled our budget in 8 years and we're still on the bottom. So it didn't work. Spending is not working. So I think that's something hopefully the new governor can look into, and there'll be enough support with true Republicans, true conservative Republicans that are bold enough and brave enough to stand up and just say no.
Yeah, I love that. Like you said, it's about finding ways to fix the problem sometimes without new laws or new legislation, and trying to go back in the budget, figure out how to rearrange and spend our money better, I guess is what you're saying.
Exactly.
There. So I got one last question for you, and I got my next interview already up, like they do every 15 minutes. How will you put freedom first in the legislature? And I can give you about 20 seconds on that.
Listen, whether it's my mom or you or me, Governor, nobody should have enough power to shut our state down, our businesses down. And that's the first thing we got to solve. We have 105 representatives, 39 senators. They have got to be involved in the process of what we do in our state. So freedom for the people and for who are elected me to be a senator, and take that power away from a governor, whoever it might be, to have that one person that can make that decision, and realize that government, is not there to tell us what to do. It's just kind of help regulate what we decide as people.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to be free to choose whether if you want to wear a mask, do it. You want a shot, do it. You want to be a boy and you a girl, go for it. You should have the freedom.
Just don't force legislation through Louisiana. Makes everybody change it.
Yeah.
Randy Bush, I got to go to my next.
Who's your next guest, by the way?
My next guest is Mary DuBuisson. Have you met Mary DuBuisson yet?
Yes, I've met Mary at a few functions over in St. Tammany.
Well, good. Well, I've been wanting to get Mary on for quite some time, so I can't. I don't want to take up too much of her time.
Okay.
So
she's cooler than me anyway. I understand. I got a radio face, my friend.
Randy, I will have you on again soon. All right, now.
Good.
Have a good day. Thank you so much. Representative DuBuisson, thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on my show today. I've been wanting you on for quite some time.
I know it's just difficult at the Capitol, when we're running every direction. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to visit with you, William.
Well, I appreciate that. You are one of the representatives that always has a smile on your face. You always seem very diligent in your personality. Like, you always seem very focused. You're not just kind of running all over the Capitol. You're very focused, it seems, and always friendly. And you seem to be paying attention a whole lot. So, I can certainly understand why you don't have time for me at the Capitol, and I understand completely. But you're running for re-election.
I am.
How many years have you been in office?
I've been in 5 because my first year was a special election to fill Greg Cromer's seat when he ran and won mayor of Slidell.
Okay. And so that does that count against your 3 terms?
No, actually, I can serve 13 as a result. If it were over 2 years that I filled a seat, I would lose those years. But no, in this case, I gained. So they said I might actually be the dean by the time 13 years rolls around.
I love it. So what can you? I shoot the questions pretty quick sometimes because I reckon 15 minutes goes fast. But what are things that you accomplished in your last 4 years or 5 years as a representative that you'd like to talk about to show what kind of work you've done?
I think just as an overall answer, the whole reason that I ran in the first place was to continue to represent the people that I worked with for 8 years as Greg's legislative assistant. And so I wanted to continue to do that. And I just couldn't do or allow somebody to run for that seat and possibly win without at least trying. So I think that's my biggest accomplishment, that I always have an ear, and people come to my office. I bring agencies together. I bring DOT to my office. I bring the parish. If anyone has an issue, whatever it would be, I always like to hear people and do my best to resolve issues. We're not always successful, but at least people know that we've tried. So, but I mean, I have legislation, of course, you know full well what some of my legislation has been that.
But that first answer, I'm gonna stop you for 1 second because I want to brag about you a little bit.
Okay.
That first answer I absolutely love, because one of the things that I often say is I think all too often our legislators get in office and they immediately want to say, you hear, how many bills did you pass? How many bills did they pass? The question's always, how many bills did you pass? And that's why I asked you kind of what your accomplishments were instead of how many bills did you pass. Even though I know you got bills that you passed,
Right.
we'll talk about those here in the next couple of minutes. But the fact that you said that you listen to your constituents, you're providing a place for people to come to talk to resolve issues and bring people together, I think is one of the most important jobs of a legislator, of a state representative. And that, to me, that you said that is going to make you one of my favorite reps,
Oh.
because I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, look, Kirk Talbot did it in his, does that in his thing with his assistant. And that's one of the things I learned from him and his assistant Tia is that they don't, that one of the biggest jobs of a rep that goes unnoticed is having an office, a local place where people in their community can go to and say, hey, I have an issue with this on a statewide. And when that rep can listen and their assistant with them can bring people together and solve issues, I think is one of the most important things. And you said that as your first answer, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. And I'll add to that too, William, is that it's not just bills that I've passed, or any of us. We cannot do this alone. So I think that's a really important thing to for people to understand and recognize. So when they come to you, even if it's with problems, it's like, look, I can't solve this on my own. This has to be a group effort. There are 105 of us, and the Senate as well, and so it's definitely a process.
And while I certainly agree with that, we need a more conservative legislature and a more Republican mindset, in the legislature. We also can't, ignore or even avoid the fact that there's going to be a lot of Democrats. There's a lot of parts in our state that's heavily Democrat, and we need more people to bring those people together. And that's kind of what I heard from you. What are some of your pieces of legislation that you're most proud of?
I brought a bill last year that failed, but I'm very proud of the fact that I did it because I did it for all the right reasons. And that was a maternal health bill. And, some people want to call it an abortion bill and use it against me. And it's really sad because I did it to fight for women and to fight for children. I am definitely a pro-life candidate, but I just cannot fathom what a woman has to go through when she's carrying a fetus that has already passed away or she knows will be non-viable and won't live very long after giving birth. And so that was the whole point of it, and so to be misconstrued or used, even if people do totally understand it. And it's also to protect the doctors who are fighting so hard to help the women as well, and then they fear of being arrested, and it just shouldn't be. But
Well, I can associate with that. I always say I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-freedom. And while we can argue all day, well, who's right, you have to be 100% pro-life or 100% freedom. I always say I think one of the best approaches to save babies and help solve problems is to be able to focus on women's health and also and that sounds to me like an adoption, but focusing on women's health is what it sounds to me like you were doing. You were doing something to focus on women's health and build a little bit of a bridge between maybe people who are more pro-choice and people who are more pro-life. And it sounds to me like that legislation created a bridge between the two in such a way that you were focusing on women's health. Is that another way to put it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful way to put it. And I totally think that Republicans are realizing that they can't be so hard fast, that exceptions just have to be allowed. And I think they're so fearful, so many, the pro-life, Right to Life and Family Forum organizations are just so fearful that given any little bit of leniency, if you will, or exception, will turn into a full-fledged, abortion on demand. And
Right.
that is not what I'm in favor of, for sure.
No, so I certainly understand, like I said, women's health on that. What on that issue? And I appreciate you brought that up because I think the convert, like even though you said your bill failed, you did something that I think is so important. A lot of times legislators put up these bills that they might know it might fail or somebody else knows it's going to fail. But I think that the conversation needs to be had, and you were bold enough and brave enough to put that up as a pro-life candidate. You were brave enough to do that to improve women's health. And even though whether you thought it was a fail or didn't think it was a fail, you recognize that the conversation needed to be had in Louisiana, and I think that's a positive approach.
Thank you, because it is not going away, obviously. Yeah. But also, as you know, I'm on appropriations, one of the committees, and I was fortunate enough to be able to bring home to St. Tammany Parish, with the help of my colleagues, $78 million just this past session alone. So I think those types of accomplishments are even not more important than the bills, because they're important as well.
Right.
We have good legislation, but I think being able to tell people this is what I've done for my hometown,
$78 million is a lot of improvements. And I like how you put that, because if your representative in your area is not fighting for money that's out there and being distributed, and they drive through these other parishes or other districts and they go, hey, I'm looking at that new bridge, I'm looking at these new buildings, these new roads, and then they come back to your district and they go, well, wait, mine isn't as pretty as theirs. That's because they sometimes have a representative that's not fighting for money. And it sounds to me like you did that, and you fought, and you got $78 million. Good job.
Thank you. But it's also about relationships, and that is something that I really, really am proud of, because I have relationships with everybody in the legislature.
Right.
I love it. As you said, you see me walking around, and I try to always be in an up mood and friendly with everyone, because we have to work together. And if we do not build coalitions, and that's how bills get passed, and that's how good work is done. It doesn't matter, the political aisle is just it's pretty crazy sometimes.
Murky water sometimes. I don't like to say a swamp, because in Louisiana, our swamps are beautiful estuaries. The swamp in Louisiana is actually a beautiful place, and so. But let's talk about some other problems in Louisiana in our last couple of minutes that you think that have to be worked on. That for your next term, what are you going to work on in our next 4 years?
Well, definitely insurance. That everybody that you talk to, that's on the top of the list as being one of the most important issues. And being on the insurance committee, I have the advantage of knowing what we're trying to do in the legislature by giving the commissioner $45 million, and then we came back for a separate crunch to go after insurance companies who have been here previously or new ones. And that way the risk can be spread upon more companies, so they can hopefully lower the rate. That's the goal. And then to have the program for the fortified roofs, where the people can receive a grant of $10,000 towards keeping the roof with straps and all of this to ensure that the roof stays on. Because if that happens, then we're going to be much more protected and less vulnerable for water damage in our homes. And the cost of everything has gone up, as you know. So that's why our rates also have gone up. Not to mention the fact that we've had one hurricane or bad storm after another. So
We had a couple bad ones hit right in a row. So I love that you're on that committee, that you're going to be able to help work on insurance rates. What about the sale or getting rid of the income tax and other issues like that? Are you there's a lot of things other representatives are talking a lot about, finding ways to not only bring people back in Louisiana, but also bring business and industry back in Louisiana. Do you have any plans for that?
Well, absolutely. I am open to anything that's going to help us keep our citizens or bring them back. Because look, I have a daughter that lives in Dallas, and so many people are leaving for other states because their opportunities are better. They don't pay tax, so the income tax, obviously. And
Right.
so we have to figure out, if we're going to make changes, we need the best changes, not just willy-nilly, but we have
Right.
to do things that are going to be not put us in worse shape budgetarily as a state, but to be able to maintain what we already have obligations to. And certainly one of those things is to get teacher pay raise, for sure, because that's also a huge issue. And I never want teachers. There are some teachers that thought that they misconstrued what we did with the stipend. It wasn't that we don't value teachers. We most certainly value teachers, but we have to be fiscally responsible, try to pay down some of the debt with the UAL, and then hopefully next year we can come back and make it a permanent raise. So,
well, and this is just my opinion and my comment on that. The way the last session ended, I think didn't bode well. I know, right? It didn't bode well for teachers, but I think part of the problem is that the legislature, I'm just saying, I'm not putting blame on anybody. I'm saying the body itself needs to find a way to put this budget stuff in the beginning of session, and if they would, instead of saving it to those last few minutes, because if they would have moved it to the beginning of session, I think that the money would have been spent better. Teachers probably would have had better representation. They would have probably gotten some more money out of the deal. But somehow or another, and I won't even go into the politics of it, that budget got moved to the last 15 minutes of session. And I think that's one of the reasons why teachers lost.
yeah.
And
Yes, lost, but again, hopefully it's a temporary situation, and they didn't go without something, which we've tried to do every year.
right.
But my husband's a teacher, so
All right. Well, I ask you one last question. I've got my next representative on is Thomas Presley. My last question for you is: will you be able to will you as a representative put freedom and liberty first when it comes to our legislation in Louisiana?
Well, this is America, so
Yep.
yes, we definitely want to do everything we can to maintain our way of life, and stand by our Constitution. So, absolutely.
Representative DuBuisson, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. There's Representative Presley. Who's up next?
Hey, Mary.
Representative DuBuisson, thank you so much for being on there. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the great interview.
I appreciate you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Representative Presley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, William. How are you?
Good. Well, you've got the best background of anybody else on the show today.
Very good. Well, my grandfather painted the painting right here.
It's always the opposite on camera.
That's it. And it's always fun to have his artwork in my office. So
I love it because your grandfather painted that.
He did. Yeah, my grandfather was an architect by profession, and then retired into painting, and has painted much of Shreveport Bossier. That's actually our federal courthouse here in Shreveport, which is a really neat view.
I like the scale. It shows this. I like the unique view of the scale being above that building.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really neat. I think it's one of his neater paintings in my eyes.
So you're running for re-election.
I'm not. We had a little shift. Barry Milligan, who is one of the state senators up here, decided not to run for re-election. And so I jumped over from my House seat in District 6 and decided to throw my hat into the Senate race for District 38.
I got to tell you, when I get caught off guard, I'm going to admit it. I thought I'm glad to hear that you're running for Senate. That's that. I tell you, I do different compliments when they deserve it, and you deserve some of the compliments because I've seen you working very, very hard in the legislature, which is why I usually don't get to interview you. Mary DuBuisson's kind of the same way. You're very diligent, and now you're shifting to the Senate. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we're excited about the opportunity to move over to the other chamber. They like to call it the upper chamber, but having served in the House, I think we're equal branches. So
That's the way it should be, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And yeah, I think my 4 years down there has been very worthwhile. I've had the opportunity to fight for certain important issues that I think are facing our state, cutting red tape, lowering our taxes, working to make sure that jobs and opportunities abound in this state. With the resources we have, there's no reason that we can't succeed and really thrive. And that's what I fought for over the last 4 years, and that's what I hope to fight for as I move over to the Senate side, hopefully, with Election Day coming up on October the 14th.
We referred to the Senate as being the upper chamber, although some people refer to the Senate as the chamber where good bills die.
I've had several die over there, so hopefully we can turn that around.
So if you had several die over there and you're going to be in the Senate now, are you going to be able to use it in a positive way, we'll say, to be able to get some of those good bills or good ideas through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of Baton Rouge is about relationships, and I've had the great fortune of really getting to know my colleagues over the last 4 years. They're great people, and people that want to move Louisiana forward. And I think that, when you look at the challenges facing our state, really we haven't grown since 1910. In 1960, 63 years ago, Louisiana and Florida were the same size. We both had 10 electoral votes, and that's the way we, of course, elected president. In 1960, we were the same size as Florida. Louisiana has not grown since 1910, but 1960, I think, is a real turning point for Louisiana. When you look at Florida and the policies that they put in place, which were pro-growth, pro-opportunity, freedom, right? It really allowed that state to flourish. They now have 30 electoral votes. We, of course, since 1960 have lost 2 members of Congress and therefore 2 electoral votes, and we now have 8. And our trajectory shows that, there's a possibility that with the next redistricting, we will lose a member of Congress, which we certainly need to turn the tide on that and move Louisiana in a new direction and move Louisiana forward. Jobs and opportunities are the way to get people to the state. And I truly believe that by cutting red tape and fixing our tax code, we're going to be able to do that.
And when you look at the land mass of Louisiana, the size of square mile area, and you look at the boundless amount of natural resources and great culture and things we have here, and you compare that the shrinking electoral votes to a state like, let's say, New Hampshire, or a state that's not much smaller in that land mass, but population wise, it really is a shame. So I'm glad that you got your laser focused on that. And I love the example about Florida. I didn't realize how in 1960 we were the same size population wise, and that's just 70 or 40, 60 years ago. That's not that long ago.
Really not. But I think the other thing is, William, when you look at what we can do, if we put the policies in place that allow this place to thrive, we in 30 years or in 60 years could be the size of Florida as far as growth. And I think that that's tremendous and something that we really need to be focused on. And like you said, laser focused on. And it's not just, having North Louisiana fight South Louisiana or looking at, the fun culture that we have. Really, jobs and opportunities are what will drive Louisiana to the forefront and being able to bring new population here and be able to recruit and retain the best and brightest that are our job creators. And that's something that I certainly have been working on in Baton Rouge and hope to continue to.
What do you think are Louisiana's biggest problems that we face today that you think you can have something to do about in the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they're multifaceted. I mean, and I think, you could look, and a lot of people want to point the finger at the current governor or the governor before or even the governor before that, right? But when you really look down deep, again, we haven't grown since 1910. The challenges that Louisiana has and Louisiana faces are as vast as they are real. But the truth is that we've got to fight one step at a time. I think that, when we look at the tax code and returning much of the power and influence back to our locals, I think that's a one step in the right direction. I certainly think when you look at the occupational licenses in this state, particularly for blue collar jobs, we have more
Right.
occupational licenses than any other state by far. And that's really hurting Louisiana's economy and our ability to grow and our ability to bring in talent and resources from other states home to Louisiana. But like you said, our people are strong. Our people are loving, are caring, and they want to see our state thrive. But by implementing those correct policies, cutting red tape, fixing our tax code, looking at crime, and making sure that we're locking away violent offenders, and making sure that our streets are safe. Those were things that the people that I'm talking to in District 38 are really laser focused on, and they know that good policy will help move our state forward.
And now, what have you done as a representative that you think you're going to be able to do better of, or what are some of the things that died in the Senate committees that you're going to be able to do better with as a senator? Do you want to make that for that connection there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think, again, the red tape is what I've been focused on. I've been trying to fix some of our challenges on nepotism and cronyism that are, I believe, are holding Louisiana back. And so, when I look at things that I want to accomplish as we move forward, certainly number one on the list is making sure that we're spending our resources appropriately and effectively. And number two on that list is making sure that we're cutting tape. We're allowing the free market to thrive, and we're ensuring that the future, not only of Shreveport-Bossier and Northwest Louisiana, is moving in the right direction, but all of Louisiana is moving in the right direction. Right. When you look at the four, I'll say, foundational points for our region, it's oil and gas and making sure that we're protecting, in the energy sector in Louisiana, and particularly Northwest Louisiana. It's making sure that we've got transportation jobs and opportunities, and that includes the investment in our roads and bridges. When you look at DeSoto Parish, for example, they send a ton of money to Baton Rouge in our severance tax. That's the money that's taxed for the oil and gas that's brought out of the ground. Much of that oil and gas is brought right here from DeSoto Parish, and they're not receiving the money back. So they sent about $100 million last year to Baton Rouge and got $1.8 million back in capital outlay dollars. That's unacceptable, and it's taking the resources from our region, and that's something that we've got to work on, and we've got to make sure that we're fighting for up here. But really, it's going to help the whole state, right? If we put the tax policies back in the hands of the locals, I think we're going to be better off. That's what states that are growing are doing. When you look at Texas, when you look at Florida, when you look at Tennessee and North Carolina, and even Washington State, which is a blue state, they all have one thing in common, which is that they don't have a personal income tax. Our personal income tax goes to the state. I think we're better off reducing significantly that burden, and again, allowing our locals to make the decisions on what policies and what tax policies are right for their communities and their regions.
So you're a guy that says, hey, let's get rid of the income tax, correct?
I certainly think we need to head in that direction. I think we've got to do it in a way that's not going to blow up our state budget. We've got a lot of challenges, like I've said. I mean, but our
Constitution is one of those challenges. But go ahead.
It's a huge challenge. And I'll tell you, William, I was one of the people that I voted no on every single vote for a constitutional amendment when it came to the ballot before I got in the legislature. And what I didn't realize at the time, and my viewpoint was, let's have a new constitutional convention and have a new constitution. Right. Well, that's not the only way that we can fix our constitution. By doing the amendments and allowing the people to see what those amendments are, that's important as well. And that's another way that we can do it without completely, having to have the unknown of what happens at the constitutional convention.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, and that's a great way to put that, because I was one of those guys about the amendments that I've always been against all these different amendments, because you wonder what about the unintended consequences that happen when you add this one onto this one, how it affects the other one, and so I appreciate that, but I also think that there's a lot of those little lock boxes, and there's a lot of little pathways where the money goes that's set up in our Constitution that really needs to be redirected in a way, like you said, back to the locals. Let the locals decide how they're going to use their money, because every part of Louisiana is different, and if we did it that way, Louisiana, New Orleans can prosper in one way, St. Tammany another way, Bossier City, Shreveport another way. And something you said that made me realize, we've got New Orleans down to the right, down that south, eastern corridor, and it's supposed to be that economic center, which they get all their own little exemptions in the Louisiana Constitution that nobody realizes that they get. Bossier, Shreveport, where you're running up there, it's a unique subset of Louisiana that could really, with the right direction and the right leadership, and that sounds like what you're doing, could connect this with a lot of the things with Texas and Arkansas and a lot of those, and rebuild a whole other set of prosperity in that area, if I'm saying that properly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that. I mean, as New Orleans goes, the rest of our state really goes. The flood of 1927 had a tremendous impact on not only New Orleans but the entirety of the state. That's really, I would argue, the turning point for Louisiana, and being pro-job and pro-opportunity, right? I mean, we had the banking and oil and gas industry that were headquarters there, and they decided to move and moved over to Texas. But for us in Shreveport, in the Shreveport area, we're 15 minutes from the Texas border. So, and my
Right.
Senate District 38, will actually go all the way to the Texas border. So when you look at a place like Logansport, for example, Logansport has a sister city on the other side of the Texas border. And we're really seeing those challenges that, you're seeing new restaurants open on the other side. You're seeing a new grocery store on the other side. Those are things that should be in Louisiana. And we should be prospering from that. But people are driving across the border because of their policies that are allowing those stores to thrive and really have the opportunity to flourish. Those are things that we need to change about Louisiana. And we need to make sure that we're certainly working to do that. If we want to make sure that our kids and grandkids have the opportunity to move to Louisiana or stay in Louisiana, we've got to change some policies. And I think that we can do that. I know that there are good folks fighting in Baton Rouge to do that. And I certainly hope to join them again next term.
In the equal chamber.
That's right. That's right.
So one last question before I bring my next guest on. She's waiting in the ballast here. Is how will you put freedom first when it comes to creating policies in the Senate to help Louisiana?
Yeah, I certainly think that as Mary said, our Constitution is founded on freedom. The American dream is founded on freedom and the opportunity to work hard and succeed. I've fought for that in Baton Rouge, and I'll continue to do so in the Senate.
I love it. Representative Presley, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, William. Have a great day.
I'm going to get you on again there if you like, because now that I know you're running for Senate, I'm excited.
I'd love to. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Soon. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Jamie, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing real good there. I'm like, thank you for getting the image up. I appreciate that. So I know you weren't able to join us by camera, and that's fine, because we really just need to hear about you, and you're running for state representative of what area for the audience?
So I'm running for state representative of District 65, and that is mostly the city of Central, and then it covers a little bit of Baton Rouge. If you're familiar with the area, it goes down O'Neill all the way to Harrell's Ferry.
So who's had that position as of now?
Currently that seat is filled by Barry Ivy.
Okay. So you're running for Barry Ivy's old seat. He's running for Senate now, I think, right?
Correct. He's running for the same Senate seat as Rick Edmonds, actually.
Okay. All right. That'll be interesting. That's a whole other topic of conversation. So Jamie, what is your background that you had before you decided to run for state representative?
So I'm a private investigator, and I'm also the Baton Rouge director of Citizens for a New Louisiana. And in doing that, along with a lot of other grassroots stuff, I've just spent years at the Capitol. That's actually how you and I met.
Right.
Just trying to answer everyone's call to action. It's been a fight for freedom for years, and not just because of COVID, but including COVID. It seems like that just really got a lot more grassroots people involved. And so, I've sat through a lot of committee hearings, and I've been on the in the balcony in the House chamber almost every single day of every
Ta-
session.
taking lots of pictures, right?
Well, yeah, when I'm allowed to.
We won't go into that. But for those who are listening, they know what that's about. Were you involved? Were you this involved before COVID? Because it's what's interesting is the COVID year I think brought a lot of people out of the woodwork to get involved in the legislature. Were you involved before that?
So I was mostly involved locally, attending my local government meetings and a little bit in education, but I think I would have to admit even that I got more involved during COVID. That's when I realized that I really had to start investing my time there. And while it's, just grassroots efforts and advocacy, it's not like I'm necessarily getting paid for my hours spent. It has been like a full-time job because that's where my
Right.
passion is and where I think people, if people can show up, I think they need to.
So this is interesting. So you basically took activism, and you're bringing it, and you're bringing that activism into more of an elected position. So your passion is what? What do you think you're most passionate about that you're going to bring to your representative office?
So the biggest frustration I have with our legislature is we lack leadership and the people do not have a voice. I feel like I've sat through so many committee hearings and people come and they wait for their time to speak, and by the time it's time for the people to speak and share their concerns and opinions, half of the room gets up and walks out. They say they're in their back room listening, but I mean, come on, let's be honest. You can hear them back there chuckling and talking, and they're not really worried about what the public's saying and that they already have their minds made up. So one thing that I'm very passionate about is bringing the people's voice back to the people's house. I think that's where we have to start with all of this. And, my plan, as we've discussed before, includes expanding the Second Amendment rights and defending parental rights and education, and obviously get rid of the income tax. And I don't think we have, I heard someone say recently, we're not a poor state, we're poorly managed. And so I think that if we can cut some wasteful spending, we can reinvest some funds into the local infrastructure and truly cut down on things like the income tax.
Jamie, I love hearing this side of you. Whenever I've seen you at the Capitol, I'm hearing the things that you're passionate about and working on, on it, on how shall I say, an active citizens approach. But now you're actually communicating that in not only a candidate's approach, but you're also telling me how you're going to do this if you are elected into this position. So as an elected official, what do you think are the biggest problems that Louisiana has? Not just what you're active in as an activist role, but what are you most passionate about? What do you think is Louisiana's biggest problems that you're going to attack?
So I think that our biggest problems are very clear, and that is we're last in everything good, we're first in everything bad. And I think that means that we need to address education, we need to address crime. Um, and it does, for me, go back to leadership. I think we've had poor leadership for a long time, and everything has followed that. I'm looking forward to just a more conservative government as a whole for Louisiana. I've been to so many meetings lately where, there's just a promise of more conservative people getting into these roles. And that's where I think we can truly, fix some things like education, for instance. The only way I think we can even address that at this point is school choice. We've done the same thing for what, 100 years?
Right.
And I mean, how many more years do we need before we realize that it's not working?
Right. Well,
Um,
and then everybody's been talking about education, but what about? I know you've talked about income tax. Are you one that wants to get rid of the income tax?
Absolutely.
I think that helps some of the poorest people in our state.
About I want to say about 15 years ago, but don't quote me on that. But when me and my husband first got serious, I was with him whenever he was doing his taxes. I was in the room with him, and the CPA told him, do you realize that essentially for the first 3 or 4 months of the year, you're working for free? That's how much you're paying into taxes. And my jaw just hit the floor. And so I have been pro abolish the income tax since that day. That day is when I was like, this is literally armed robbery. This is too much.
Right. 3 or 4 months. Imagine what that could do to some of the poorest families in our state.
Right.
And imagine what that, and look, and while I certainly agree with conservative policies and, and which is actually spoken by more Republicans, I also think that the Democrats, there's many Democrats that end up being more conservative minded than some Republicans vote. Do you
Right.
find that also?
I do find a little bit of that. If you look at the conversations on Gabe Furman's bill, I'm gonna just use that for an example. If you look at the conversations that were had on that, it was really interesting to see that we have a lot of more morally conservative Democrats, and we have a lot of morally liberal Republicans in office right now. I mean, you had Republicans arguing that these surgeries, for instance, that should be left up to the parents, and not understanding Gabe's main point, which was nobody has the right to harm children. And so I use that for an example because it was most recent and I think people were more vocal about it. But I think it really did show that sometimes party isn't everything. Sometimes you really need to look at the person's character, what they stand for, what they fight for, and what their actions are.
I find that conservative policies know no party, like we've been
Amen.
talking about. And I think that if we really show the value of a lot of the conservative policies, promoting families, promoting good education, these are all conservative values. Raising the income for everybody and raising opportunity for everybody from the bottom up, everybody. Those are conservative values. Will you, as a representative, be able to not only work with the conservative people in the Republican Party, but also the liberal people in the Republican Party, but also be able to bring more Democrats to the table, like you've talked about, and say, hey, look, these policies can benefit all of us? Is that something that you think you will have the ability to do as state representative?
Absolutely. One thing that has been a blessing, honestly, over the past 2 years are the relationships that I've built in working with people as a grassroots activist. I say that I don't have a better name for it, but
Right.
I've answered as many calls to action as I could because I've always believed we need to show up for each other's fight. I don't care what your party is. I don't care where you come from. I just don't care about any of that. If we agree on this one thing, that this is the right thing, then I think we should all fight together for that. Or if we all agree that something is absolutely terrible, why not fight together to make sure that doesn't happen? And so I think that's where I've built a lot of relationships with a lot of people, and I'm I'm pretty easy to work with. I think I'm reasonable. I love the conversations where everybody doesn't necessarily agree, but you just throw everything on the table and you sort through it and you find what we do agree on, and what does work, and you actually find solutions instead of just sitting here banging our heads against the wall with all of these problems and never making any strides forward.
I had a conversation the other night with Mandy Landry, who people say she's the most progressive liberal Democrat. I've
Hmm.
had conversation with Mary DuBuisson just a few minutes ago on the show, where she had a bill that some of the conservatives didn't like, but where she showed that it helps more people. And I told both of them, I think that sometimes having the being daring and bold and brave to bring up things, to have the conversation, which is something that you alluded to when you said throw it all on the table.
Hmm.
I think having the conversation is sometimes better than having the bill, because
Yeah.
sometimes the conversation brings solutions that are work for everybody. And I'm glad you said that, Jamie. That's great. So let's talk about real quick, because we have to wrap. We have a few minutes. I'll bring on my next guest in a few minutes. We talked about freedom, liberty, how we can all unite on freedom, liberty, and especially fiscally conservative values. What will you do as a representative to help bring all those values? Is there any ideas that you have that you'll bring in, that you'll start on right away when you get elected?
When people ask me this question, I don't know that my answer is the one that y'all expect, because I know so many people say, well, I'll bring this bill and I'll bring that bill. But you know what I would really like to do? I would really like to sit down with the authors of some of the great bills that have been killed by the governor, for instance, that have been vetoed by the governor, that have made it through with almost no nays on either Senate or House side. So we know they're good. They've been sorted through and debated. And I would like to sit down with them and take some of these great ideas and try to actually get those through. I think it's more important to kill bad legislation than to pass good legislation. But I also think it's good to work with people who have been there on the projects that they've been working on, if I think that we will benefit from it. And there's a lot of things, especially in the past session or two, that I think we should bring back to the table that we're accused of being solutions in search of a problem, for instance.
I love it. Last question before I bring my next guest on. My next guest is Delisha Boyd. But last question for you, Jamie, is how will you put freedom first when it comes to your office in Baton Rouge?
I'll continue doing what I've been doing. And, let me echo the Attorney General. He said recently, when it's time to elect leaders, look for who stood up for you when it wasn't popular to do. And I think it's important for people to realize this isn't about who you want to have over for dinner or who you grew up with. It's about who you can count on to fight for you, represent you, and ensure your voice is heard. And that's what I've been doing. And the reason why is because I do value freedom, because that's what I fight for every single day.
I love it. Jamie Pope, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I'll try to get you back on before the election, all right?
I look forward to it. Thanks.
Have a great day. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye. Representative Delisha Boyd, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being on there. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, I love I love your flag in the background.
Got a flag, got a Mardi Gras umbrella there. I don't think you could see the umbrella real well.
I can see the little fringes. It's got some white fringe on there. Yeah. Well, not only do I thank you for being on my show today, but I thank you so much for working hard for your district. And I know that you're a representative that does that. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. But first, before we do that, where is your district, Delisha? And I want to say that for the listeners. I know where your district is, but for our listeners, so they can know, because this is people watching statewide right now.
I am all of Algiers with the exception of Park Timbers. When I was elected in the special election, it was all of Algiers with the exception of Park and Tall Timbers. I got Tall Timbers back in the redistricting. So now it encompasses almost all of Algiers. What is known to New Orleanians as the West Bank of New Orleans. However, it's south. But
Exactly. Everybody thinks Baton Rouge is north, but it's really west.
Yeah.
Look, everything north of Louisiana is Canada.
Yeah.
So that's it. So whose seat was that before?
Gary Carter, who was elected in the special election to the Senate after Troy Carter was elected in a special election to the congressional seat that Cedric Richmond held.
So you've had this seat for how long?
2 years.
Okay.
Years, yeah. I started running in July of 2021. I think it was early. I think the election was supposed to be in July.
Right.
So 2021, and then Ida hit, which pushed me to the October ballot of 2021. So elected in October of 2021. First day of session was redistricting with a hell of a welcome to the House.
Right. Well, so but I might have to talk to you about that too. But so are you somebody that are you gonna be able to run to have 3 full terms and a half term, or because you already served 2 years, are you only be able to serve?
So really, what happened is because the election was moved, now I get 3 full terms.
Oh, nice. Okay, gotcha.
Because I was elected at the end of October, wasn't sworn in until right the week after Thanksgiving. So that put me below the
2-year mark.
Yeah.
The halfway point or whatever.
Yeah. So I get 3 full terms now.
So you get thrown into a special session where there's redistricting. You don't even get a chance to pass any bills. You're just there as somebody in one of the biggest quagmires we've had. I don't want to describe it quite like that, but the reality. What's that?
I would.
Well, when you're listening to everybody everybody seems to have a bad opinion on it, and that's a whole other story for another
Very
day.
eye-opening for me.
What's that?
It was very eye-opening for me. That being my welcome to the House. That 3 weeks was, for lack of a better term, like gut wrenching. I was able to hold my district together. I was able to even add to my district so that more of Algerians had representation. And even though I don't represent Park Timbers, I actually attend their meetings because I have the interest of Algerians. And so I do attend their meetings as well. But it was gut wrenching, some of it, to see. And I had a conversation with a friend last night and this morning, just how people don't understand how the state should function as a whole. Although I represent Algiers, my voice actually goes towards the state.
Right.
I
Exactly.
think sometimes that gets missed, that although you represent a district, your voice and your vote counts for what happens in the state.
That's exactly right. And all too often, and I'm glad you brought that up, Representative, all too often people forget that you got to think on a local level, but think about how that bill or legislation is going to affect the people in the state. And you didn't get to experience that in redistricting. You're kind of thrown into a different type of situation with there. But let's talk about what you're able to accomplish in your first 2 years as representative. But before that, what is your background? What do you do? What did you do before you were representative?
Real life, not what I have to still do, because representatives don't make any money.
Exactly.
I own a real estate brokerage. I have about 62 agents that work for me in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So my foundation is real estate.
So you're able to see things as a representative from a real interesting perspective. Sorry. My allergies are acting up today. So you're able to see things from a different perspective as a real estate owner, as a business owner, excuse me, and as a representative. How are you able to parlay that into your position?
Well, I've been long before I got elected that was very active in my community. I didn't just wake up one day and decide I want to do something for the community. I was actually doing it in my role as a citizen of the state. So I have always seen what I thought was the bigger picture, not for just myself, for our children, for the children to come. So just been very active, and I participated in as either a campaign manager or strategic manager for several candidates for the last 15, 16 years.
So what were you able to do in your first 2 years? Because you get thrown into a special session on redistricting. There wasn't a lot of time for bills. And
I got a full session in though. So after redistricting, we went right into we had 3 weeks off and went into the regular session for 2022. I filed maybe between 12 and 15 bills. I got 6 of those through and signed by the governor. This 2023 session, we were only able to file 5 regular bills because it was a fiscal year, and I got 3 through that I thought held some teeth and some weight and would make a difference. So I think I'm doing pretty good for a new girl. Yeah.
And look, and not that filing more bills makes you a better legislator, but listening to the people and doing things that represent your district, is equally more important. What were you able to get through in your first session?
I got a Healthy Foods Act passed, where the kids would get at least one healthy meal. So many kids, especially in New Orleans, live below the poverty level, that the school lunch may be the only healthy meal that they get all day. I was able to get some derogatory terms out of HOA docs and POA docs throughout the year. Just things that I thought mattered. So this session, I was able to get a domestic violence bill out, which extended some help for them. Thank you. The current law read that the clerks and judges would have to have everything filed and in the registry by the next business day, which basically meant that if you got harmed on a Friday after 5 o'clock, Saturday, Sunday, and God forbid it was a holiday weekend, like the holiday weekend that's coming up,
Right.
potentially go 3 to 4 days without anyone having any proof that you had filed to get a protective order. And so we got that through, got it passed. It went into law August 1st, which is great. So now if something happens, even if you don't have the actual document in hand, if you call that person, at first I was saying that man, but through my investigation, I found out there are a lot of men who are abused.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So I'll say that person, the police officers will know that there's a protective order out because it's been entered into the registry, which will help. It's not the end all to end.
Right.
But Louisiana now, since COVID, has we are #1 in the United States for domestic abuse and domestic abusers that kill their abused people. We're #1. So I felt like the need to do something, and it was a collective effort. I had the clerks, I had the sheriffs that work with me on that, the DAs work with me on that. My initial bill said I wanted it updated every 2 hours. I was really thinking that pre-COVID, post-COVID, that everybody had a mechanism to work electronically.
And what I like about what you're saying, Representative, is that you brought people together.
Yes.
It's good legislation like that. That's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. And it's not a state rep issue. It's not a sheriff's issue. It's an everybody issue.
Yes.
And you really worked hard to bring people together from all sides and got that legislation passed.
Yes.
By building bridges. And that's a good thing. I commend you for that.
Thank you so much.
What do you think are some of the biggest problems that Louisiana is faced with right now that we need to work on to get back to being that gem of the South that we used to be?
Oh, God. I think we got to get out of the way of ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
When you're elected to office, again, although you're elected to a specific district, especially on this level, on the state level, we have to be conscious of what we do because it affects the entire state. What I'm finding is we are getting lost in self-gratification, some people. Self, quote unquote, power, maybe, I'm not sure. But we are seeing right now the highest middle school dropout rate in our state. Middle school.
Yeah, middle school.
Right?
Yeah.
And in New Orleans, that's the base of our crime. 12, 13, 14-year-olds are committing crimes at a high alarming rate. And I think that goes back to education. We have a state where you're not required to be certified to teach. I told you I had 62 agents. They can't show a lease without certification.
Right, exactly.
But you can teach our children without certification. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Which creates a problem. I mean, picture you have someone who's not qualified to be in, and she could be smart. I'm not picking on teachers, right? You can be smart, you can have a master's degree, but if you haven't taken that extra level to understand how to identify that Delisha might be an auditory learner, right? William might be dyslexic, and Katie might be visual.
Right.
Delisha and Katie get labeled as slow learners. Well, we're not. You just haven't found our learning style, right?
Right.
William is probably the smartest kid in the class, but he sees things differently, right? But if you can't identify that, then Delisha, Katie, and William go through school, pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, misdiagnosed, basically, not being able to be touched by someone who understands how we learn when we should be learning the fundamentals of reading, comprehension. And in fourth grade, you're supposed to be reading to learn. Well, we can't because we haven't learned how to read right? And comprehend right. And so, and then COVID hit these kids, which to me, another mental health issue, because kids are we look at children to be resilient.
What about things like getting rid of this? Because I agree with you on education, and you're spot on, and I appreciate the fact that you're laser.
Means teachers' pay raises have to come in, though.
Yep.
We have
And-
universities right now that won't have the education program because the enrollment is so low. But you're not going to get a valedictorian or salutatorian or anybody from the top 10 going into education when we have the lowest paid teachers in the southern region, right? They want to make money. They want to be doctors and lawyers, etc.
Right.
We have to change that perception because our children are our next generation. They are tomorrow's leaders.
And the teachers lost in this last session because they saved that budget till the last 15 minutes instead of fixing it in the beginning of session, when I think that the teachers could have benefited more if they would have done that. And it's not just teachers, it's all of Louisiana could have benefited if that budget would have been negotiated at the beginning of session instead of waiting till the last 15 minutes to vote on it.
Absolutely.
But what do you think? What about getting rid of the state income tax? And what do you think about bringing businesses back to Louisiana? We got about another minute before I go on my next guest, but what do you think about that?
To bring businesses back, we have to have something that they want to come back to. So we got to get a hold of education because they're going to want to empower their children. We got to get a hold of the crime because they don't want to come and live in fear. So beyond just the taxes, we have to make Louisiana more appealing to businesses to want to come and to want to stay. You know, we have had a lot of businesses that have folded due to insurance. They can't afford insurance on their buildings anymore. I get those calls all the time. I have several businesses right now listed in my company because the insurances and the flood insurances have skyrocketed. So beyond the income tax part of it, we have to make our state more appealing for businesses wanting to come here. And those that are here, we want them to stay here, right?
Right.
So I think that is the key for that part.
Representative Boyd, I have one last question for you before my next guest. I ask everybody, what will you do to put freedom first in our Louisiana laws?
Continue to fight. I brought the exception for rape and incest. That should be a choice between that person and that family.
There you go.
Yeah, we have to have our own voice. So to create our freedom and keep our freedom, I have been pushing the voters out. We did a survey of Louisiana. 76% of Louisianians believe in an exception. That's everybody. Democrats, Republicans, women, men. We did the survey statewide so I could have for that bill. But if these people who fill up the survey don't get together and decide we want a voice beyond just that one person in that office, that one person in that seat, and create people who understand what the state wants, we will be lost.
Representative Boyd, I thank you very much for your time. I really do. I'm glad that we had a little bit of time to get a chance to know you some more. And I think it's important not only for our state and for your district, but for the future of Louisiana. And I really appreciate the fact that you're so involved in your community and your district. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Well, I'll be in touch soon. I'll have you on. We'll do another one soon and talk about some legislation that when your next session comes up, we'll talk about your legislation to help out any way we can to get some exposure on it. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, William. Have a great
day. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hollis Day, how are you doing today, my friend?
Hey, William, doing good.
All right. There you go. There you go. Look, if we still had phone books, you could put a couple phone books under your seat there and get up a little bit higher, right?
You caught me just kind of leaning back, relaxing a little bit.
That's all right. Look, I like the "Don't Tread on Me" flag in the background. I've noticed that. Is there another name for the "Don't Tread on Me" flag?
Yes, the Gadsden flag.
The Gadsden flag. Okay. So here's where the confusion came in. I heard a story being told to me yesterday, and they called it something else, not the Gadsden flag. And I said, that's not what the "Don't Tread on Me" flag is called. And they kept saying the Gideon flag, the Gibson flag. And then they threw me off. So you see, the next day comes along, I get to see your flag. You have to let me know it's the Gadsden. Remind me it's the Gadsden flag. So now I know that you are truly a freedom type minded candidate for running for state rep, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
What area are you in?
William, I'm in District 66, which is pretty much the southeast corner of the parish of East Baton Rouge Parish. Best way to say it is most of my district is with the city of St. George.
Okay.
That never-ending battle between the folks who voted for it and the current mayor of Baton Rouge. But it covers part of Highland Road, north of I-10, like the Hoosier Tiger Bend area, but yet down to the very southeast corner of the parish in University Club. There's 3 golf courses in the neighborhood: William University Club, Country Club Louisiana, and Santa Maria.
Oh, wow.
Probably the only district with 3, neighborhood golf courses in the district.
Do you campaign on the golf courses a lot?
Some probably don't want to hear it though when I make a bad shot.
So let's talk about your background. You're running for state rep. What's your background and what caused you to parlay from that background to wanting to run for state rep?
Yeah, so right out of college, I graduated from Louisiana Tech in 1999, and I coached football and baseball for 2 years. Went from there, and I knew that was going to be a career for me. Went into the nursing home administration business and did that for 7 or 8 years total, Mississippi and Louisiana. Was in pharmaceutical sales for a while, and kind of backed into the financial services industry when I was trying to help my dad with his finances. And so, I have a talk radio show in Baton Rouge called Sage Money Radio. I've been doing it for a little bit over 11 years. It's on weekends. Of course, we had to pause that because of something called the equal airtime law of 1934. And so that's on pause. And but that's it. That's pretty much what I've done up to this point.
What made you decide to want to throw your hat in the ring for state rep?
Yeah, the main thing, William, is the total insanity of the lockdowns and mandates. I remember specifically on my back porch when all this insaneness was going on. I remember thinking, okay, it's like March of 20. Okay, I'm like, wait, we just had an election. We have a conservative majority house. We have a supermajority Senate. What is going on? Like what?
Right.
Where are these conservatives? Because if you're conservative, then you believe in individual freedom. Individual freedom, William, is the highest order. Period.
Right.
So I just remember thinking, what is going on with these? Like, what is happening? Well, just as things played out, we have, just no leadership, with major lack of leadership. And I've been saying that for the last 4 years of my radio show. There's just no leadership in the House or the Senate. These leaders don't believe in true individual freedom. They think they're better. I mean, these guys think they're better at me making a decision for me than myself. And William, I've been talking about mandates for years, okay? Because I look at Social Security, my business, I help people a little bit with their Social Security. And so Social Security, when I think of Social Security, I think of the government going, you know what, Hollis, you're too stupid to manage your own money.
Right.
We're going to take it from you every month.
Right.
Trust me, Hollis, trust us.
Right.
We're going to take it from you every month. If you live long enough, we're going to give you a little bit back we're going to give you a little bit back each month. William, my parents died at 50. My mother died at 54 years old with ovarian cancer. My father died 17 months later of a pulmonary embolism. He was 64. My parents were 9 years apart. My parents were forced to put into Medicare and Social Security their entire life, never got a penny from either one.
That's right.
Where's that money go? Well, it didn't go down to me and my sister.
It bought a hammer or a toilet for the military that cost $200,000.
Yeah. So I was kind of familiar with mandates a little bit before mandates became a thing. And so, the fact that I can remember the 6 feet rule. I remember talking to my daughters going like, you know what, the 6 feet, like, why is it not 6.5 or 7 or 5.5? Like, where do these people come up with 6 feet? Well, we all know it was just a bunch of crap, So I was very disappointed in the lack of leadership.
What's the 6 foot rule? What are you talking about? Or distance apart.
Yeah. So I was just very disappointed in the lack of leadership. I mean, William, I'm very much into fitness. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to the gym, but I could go play video poker. I mean, think about that.
Right. Exactly.
The insaneness of these gutless, cowardly politicians telling me, Hollis, you can't go to the gym, but go play video poker. I mean,
you can't go to church, but you can go to the casino.
Yeah,
because the casinos pay us more money than the churches, by the way.
That's true. So anyway, that really fired me up. And once I found out the current rep was going to run for the Senate, I mean, I said, okay, I'm doing this. So I'm really pushing that freedom, liberty platform. In that, yes, we need a government. Well, we need the government in our life as little as possible.
Right.
Not overbearing and telling us what we can and can't do as far as, putting experimental drugs into our system or, putting a mask on. I mean, look, if you want to put 10 masks on wrap around your head, do that. If you want to get a COVID shot every day, do that. But don't tell me who is fit and healthy that I need to do this, that I need to get this shot before I go fly or something. That's just where the massive government overreach is what we have seen the last 4 years. And I think we've seen part of that too, not just coming down from the federal government here in Louisiana. Right. Our government doesn't trust individual people to make their own choices.
Freedom is a burden. Freedom is a burden. Freedom is not an easy thing. And the problem is, and our founding fathers, when they created our Constitution, and when they were in that time period, government did very little to nothing. People don't realize that in today's world, how big our government is and all the things that government does for us. That didn't exist, back then. We had raw freedom at the time. And we can say today, there's going to be some people on the Republican side of the fence. They're going to say, well, we're modern now and we got this. Well, we might be more modern as a society, but freedom is as eternal as this universe is. And when you take the raw freedom that we had back then, where the individuals were responsible for the roads, the individuals, and granted, that's real raw freedom. And you go to today and you say, what's wrong with having raw freedom today instead of turning to the government to provide us with security, to provide us all the things that we need in life? It's easy, but when you give up that freedom, you give up control of your own destiny. Correct. And when you give up control of your destiny, we lose things like prosperity. We lose things like community values. Part of the reason why we have such high crime rates is because we've abdicated control of crime to government. And I could go on down the list. I'm on freedom roll. I'm sorry.
I'm with you step for everything you're saying. I'm with you step for step, no doubt.
Yeah, and that's what amazes me when I got to get a chance to talk to you some more about how freedom minded you are. And I think that when we look at the legislative body, everybody tends to focus on the individual candidates for a particular district. And part of the reason why I'm doing these shows right now, these statewide elected shows and these local elected shows, is because on a state level, I think everybody needs to look. And I even tell my national listeners, look at what they're doing in California, Florida, Louisiana. Look here, because when you meet the individuals and we realize, hey, that person knows a little bit about this, that person knows about this, let's put a great team together for Louisiana. And I think when we look at freedom-minded candidates, I think that's an important part of the team for Louisiana.
And William, this sounds kind of cliche, but like I'm getting goosebumps right now talking to you about it, because also too, during this whole thing, I was kind of the caretaker for my uncle, my dad's brother. And he went to a nursing home. And again, I'm very familiar with nursing homes. Okay. I used to manage them in 2 different states. And so he went into a nursing home really just for rehab, kind of to get his strength back up. Okay.
Right.
He never came out. And he was a big time extrovert. I mean, very, very, like, I'm calling his friends to go see him. They can't even go see him because this is what happens. This is how we could communicate with my uncle. He would get on his cell phone. I would get on my cell phone. And we look at each other through the window when we talk. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
Insane. I mean, and I'm convinced he died of loneliness because he couldn't even talk to his friends. You're talking about a guy who, he was up and lived around Ethel, around Clinton, Louisiana. He'd have breakfast, in the morning with his guys and lunch. All of a sudden to where he can't have visitors.
Right.
It's insane. So
it's why so many people that are put into solitary confinement die so quickly. In jail. And so what happened to your uncle was much like being in jail and in solitary confinement.
Well, that also fired me. I mean, I already knew I was going to run, enter the race at that point in time, but just added more fuel to the fire.
So what government did there was they made people, through the narratives, they made people feel like they had to give up and abdicate their control or their power or their freedom, and allow government to take their loved ones and lock them away and take away freedoms of, not only the family, but of the individuals, where the government had control. That family had no power to be able to say, hey, you know what? we're going to take this family member back, and we're going to be able to give them the freedom they need to be able to thrive. I know I'm kind of going off a little bit there on that, but the reality is, like we're talking about, when we abdicate our freedom to government, we're abdicating our livelihood and our prosperity. How will you bring that to your office as a state rep?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely, running on the Freedom Liberty platform, and I think I have a pretty good pulse, William, just on what's going on in society, the world. Sometimes for me it gets heavy, and what I mean for that is I just wake up sometimes. Some days are worse than others, and it's just like I just see what's going on, and I'm very old-fashioned with values and traditions, and this sounds kind of weird, but I will turn the Andy Griffith Show on sometimes and watch it to kind of give me a boost. The days of Mayberry. So as far as what I will do, I'm a very principled man, and the people that the legislators that I have become friends with, happen to all be part of the 19 that stood strong. That's not a coincidence,
right?
And William, I'll tell you a story right quick. Another reason. To me, this is just confirmation, and I think you're a man of faith. I was going to Ruston, Louisiana in June of 2020 for a baseball regional. Okay, me and a buddy of mine, and I'm griping the whole way. I mean, Baton Rouge to Ruston is about 4 hours, and I'm we're talking about politics the whole way up there, and I'm saying, like, there's this guy named Alan Seaball. He's some state rep from Bossier, Shreveport, somewhere up there, and he's been the first one, really the only one, that has stood up to the governor so far that I've seen.
Right.
And so, I'm reading some of his Facebook posts to my buddy as we're driving to Ruston. Okay. So, and we don't talk about politics the whole time, but it's a big part of the conversation because I'm just furious of what's going on. We get to the baseball stadium, William, in Ruston, and we park, we walk in, and me and my friend, we go sit down. Okay. Game starts a few minutes later. There's 4 empty seats next to us. And so, a few minutes later, these 4 gentlemen come and sit down. So we're watching the game. So, when you're in a baseball stadium, you're bumping shoulders next to the guy
right
next to you. So this guy kind of leans into me, reaches out his phone. He's like, "Hello." And he's like, "Yeah, look, okay, yeah. Well, look, I didn't get elected to go to Baton Rouge. Let that happen. Let me watch this baseball game. I'll call you back." So obviously I hear that. I mean, he's next to me. I hear that,
right.
And I look at him. It's Alan Seaball.
I love it.
So I bumped shoulders with him, and we start talking. We talked the entire time. Told him that I was going to run for state rep as long as the current guy, because I heard the current guy was going to run for Senate, which he is. And so I felt like Alan pretty much gave me a litmus test right then for the next 7 innings. But me and my friend, we went up during the 7th inning stretch, we went to go tour the new clubhouse. And I said, "Can you believe that I'm sitting next to Alan Seaball?" Because I kind of dissed my friend,
Right.
But William, do you understand that if me and my friends sit in opposite seats, then I'm not sitting next to Alan? I mean,
exactly.
Alan walks in last instead of first. I mean, so many things, So I said, "Brendan, don't you think that's confirmation that I'm supposed to run?" He goes, "I do." And so, we take the tour, we come back and sit down, and one of Alan's friends said, "Mr. Day, I heard y'all's conversation." And he goes, "I'm gonna tell you what, it's providential that you sat next to him." So we exchanged phone numbers, William, that night, and so it was a regional. So the next day there was another game, and I sat next to him for another game. And he went back. I feel like he went back and listened to my radio shows, a couple of them, because he knew some of my views and things, and some of the things I was saying, And so he's like, "Hollis, you would fit in with a good crowd down here." So we exchanged phone numbers, and just kept in touch a little bit. And here we are 3 years later, and I'm knee deep in this race.
So let's talk about some of the, and I'm letting us go a little bit longer because you're my last interview for this show, and so you're getting the benefit of having a little extra time. So let's talk a little bit about what you think are the biggest problems that Louisiana is facing right now. And we're going to talk about freedom, liberty again after that. But what do you think are the biggest problems facing Louisiana that's holding us back?
Well, we have an outward migration of what's going on for sure. And, so how do you first we got to stop people from leaving, and then and then next that we try to attract them back. Well, how do you stop them from leaving? Well, we have a state income tax. We're one of the only southern states that have a state income tax. So I'm all for abolishing a state income tax. Now, do I have the answer to how do you replace that income? Well, William, this is a thing that I feel like politicians don't talk about. Okay. I'm sure everybody at some point in their life lost a job or something and said, okay, we have some luxuries here. We need to cut some things. Why don't we have to talk about limiting? Why don't we have to talk about shrinking the size of government? I mean, do we need all these state employees? You know, there's several things you can do. Maybe put a hiring freeze until we figure things out. Maybe some of these government agencies can be combined. And I know that, and there's more things than just that because of their salaries, but shrinking the size of government, stopping the outward migration, taxes, you know, abolishing the state income tax, and again, trying to find out where we're going to come up with that extra revenue. Crime is a massive issue. You know, I always do anything I can to support the police, but we also need to make sure that these thugs, that, you know, the police, I never understood it. The policemen risk their lives trying to catch these people, right. And they catch them, and you know, maybe they bond out that night, or they're out a couple months later. You know, that's a major thing, and one of my main platforms I've been talking about is school choice. You know, a true school choice, William, where money follows the child. Arkansas just put something in place that's been fantastic. Ohio just passed something about 2 months ago, I believe, and Arizona. And those are 3 states that have this, that we could probably look at as Louisiana, look at each state and kind of pull from each one to make our own.
So so if you can point to any 1 or 2 things that you think would solve outward migration, is there anything that you could think other than, you know, we talked about sales tax, get rid of the income tax, or income tax, not sales tax. Is there anything else that you think that we can do to bring more businesses into Louisiana and keep people from leaving besides income tax?
Yeah, so less government regulation, you know, and exactly what does that mean? I don't really do. Well, I do a little business in other states, but not to the form of where I'm having to go get a bunch of licensures. But it sounds like for my friends who have a company and maybe they're licensed to do some business in Texas and Alabama, Mississippi, it seems like Louisiana just has more regulation and more hoops to go through, you know, to establish businesses. So again, shrinking the size of government, you know, getting government out of the way of the private sector, that let the private citizen go do his job and make money. And obviously, so if you know, if you're doing those things and you bring people back, because there is an issue. I mean, if we're losing 200,000 people, I think we've lost 200,000 people the last 8 years total.
That's right.
That's less people paying in taxes, right?
That's right.
So what is it? What is the Democrat answer for that? Well, we got to raise taxes. Well, no, I think it's just the opposite. You know, we have to lower taxes, maybe slash.
And what was the Republican-led legislatures saying last session? Let's spend more money. Let's bust the cap. You know,
they said it, and they did it for sure.
They sure did it. And look, let me tell you something. I've talked to some other representatives online on air that have said, well, you know, that the money is there. It's one-time money. We need to spend it to cover some projects. And then when you talk to the other side about spending or busting the cap, I go, okay, well, I can understand having the surplus. It's money that's there. Let's spend it on projects. Let's just spend all the money. Now the problem is you spend all the money, okay, on the projects because we need these, you know, roads and bridges and and improvements. But then there's no money, and now you don't have options. You know, there's options that you might want to have later, like getting rid of the income tax. Where's the money going to come from? Some people want to phase out income tax. They say, well, we're going to lower it over 3 years, 5 years, whatever, till we have zero. And some people say we're going to get rid of it right now. Well, when you don't have a surplus or you don't have money in the bank, and look, and you and I both know we're being simplified right now. When you get in office and you see the budget and you see what money can move where, what I'm saying now might not fit perfectly, but the gist of it does. The reality is, you know, when you spend all the money and you don't have anything saved, you lose options on what you can do now or later. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you know, it's and William, it goes. So what happened busting the cap, right? I think it goes beyond. So I agree with everything you said, but I think it goes beyond that. And I think it goes beyond some of these Republicans who are not true conservatives. They know that we're going to have a Republican governor come in next, and I think it was intentional. I think it was intentional to do that because now potentially, the new governor, who we pray and hope is going to be Republican, is going to start out possibly in a hole. Or I think maybe like year 2 is when it's going to hit hard. So I think it was intentional.
Why do you think it was intentional? This is interesting. You got my curiosity peaked. Why do you think it was intentional
Well,
that they did it that way?
Well, because we're going to face a deficit in about 2 years when the 0.45% sales tax rolls off. Where's that money going to come from? And I got asked in another interview, would I be in favor of that, renew that? And I said no. And the guy goes, where do you replace the $500 million that it brings in? And I said, why don't we ever talk about cutting government? Why don't we ever talk about that? Why don't we ever talk about consolidating state agencies? So the intentional part is, I think some of these, let's just call them what they are, some rhinos. I don't think they want the guy to be governor who I think is going to be governor. And so intentionally, they did that. Why not put some of that money away, what they call the rainy day fund?
Right.
Why do we have to blow it all? And I know they paid off. I know they
some of it saved for backup.
I know they paid off some debt, but they didn't do the most responsible thing, for sure. The money came back to the district at the behest of the state. So yeah, I'm convinced that some of these, people that maybe were Democrats 3, 4, 10 years ago, did it intentional to put the next governor in a hole when he starts.
That's an interesting perspective. Now, in talking about that, we look at how we have to look at the budget, how the money is spent, how it can be spent more conservatively. But as I always say, conservative values, we keep saying conservative, but fiscal conservative values know no party. So it's not just about Republicans. It's not just about rhinos. It's showing everybody that if we cut money, instead of like the last governor, or our current governor still, who tends to use narratives to make decisions, we're looking at trying to find a governor and leadership in the legislature who's going to use principles and fiscally conservative minded values to actually save the money instead of spending it in a narrative driven way. Would you agree with that?
Oh, William, we're walking step for step, man. Everything you're saying is, even though sometimes I feel like fiscally, Republicans usually are more fiscal. They're more fiscally
and principle, right? The narrative driven, correct?
Right, but when you look, Republicans spend it just as much as the Democrats do, and so, and again, it goes back to that saying, William, that most conservatives, or if not all, are Republicans, but not all Republicans are conservative.
That's right.
And we have.
And let's not, always associate conservative with Republican, because like you said, all too often I get mad that the Republican Party stole the word conservative, because we've got a lot of Republicans that wave the conservative flag that aren't actually conservative. And since conservative values know no party, we can actually, if we work harder as Republicans, we can bring more people together on conservative values that serve every aspect of our society and serve everybody in society better and more efficiently than the narratives do.
Correct. I agree.
Well, all right. Well, look, Hollis, one last question for you before we wrap up here. And that is, how will you put freedom first as a state representative when you're in office? How will you put freedom first to help Louisiana?
Wow. So again, I'm really pushing that freedom liberty platform. Because I often think what I've done a couple of years ago when all this took place as a state rep, I would stand strong against tyranny. Again, it goes back to, I really think individual choice, individual freedom is the highest honor that we have. So, be part, William, hopefully, of a legislature that is going to pass and break records for passing conservative, individual, freedom-loving legislation come 2024.
I love it, because I'll say this before I wrap up. All too often, I think that our constitution, our state constitutions, and our federal constitution get stepped on and circumvented by Congress and legislatures because they get to pass, laws without always being constitutionally minded. But the administrative state, which you're looking to consolidate and reduce, you didn't say administrative state, but you're saying bureaucracies and agencies. Right. That's an administrative state. When you shrink those departments on a state level, it protects our freedoms and liberties. For our state constitution, we need our Congress to do the same thing. Our bureaucracies in D.C. to do the same thing. We need to shrink them and help and keep them from making rules, laws, and policies that circumvent our Constitution. And it sounds to me like you've got that in mind on a state level.
Yeah, you're right, William. And one last thing on that topic is because sometimes I feel like DC is almost too gone. Now, I'm a very outspoken Christian, and I think we're on the winning side of this whole thing. As Christians, we are called to fight until it's over with, but we're on the winning side. But let's say DC is too gone. Well, that's where, to me, the states can actually get together, become sovereign. So now I think as state legislators, we have more responsibility to make sure Louisiana is protected. Because at the end of the day, without 50 states, there is no federal government. So
right.
The federal government's out of control. So I do think that we can get Louisiana sovereign and protect itself from the federal government.
I love it. Hollis Day, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, William. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
We're going to talk soon, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.